Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chiron Creative Podcast. I'm Lauren Wilde, your host, and I'm so excited to talk about all things Chiron from the astrological mythic perspective. I am a professional astrologer. I focus a lot on predictive astrology, some mundane. I'm more focused on people's personal charts and their evolution. I particularly love evolutionary astrology, and also the channel that happens between Uranus and Chiron is kind of my specialty because that's something that I personally have in my own natal chart. So let me just share a little bit of the background for Chiron before we get into all of his myth. And that is, I really strongly resonate with Chiron, and I did not fully understand how my Chiron was working until I decided to really deep dive and learn. I personally have Chiron directly conjunct my descendant, or the seventh house cusp, which is the area of partners, people that you magnetize and draw in. And what a lot of people don't understand about the seventh house, I know I sure didn't, is that the seventh house is the house of consciousness. It's the mirror to the self, which is the first house in the ascendant. And so what we unconsciously do with the seventh house is we attract in, whether unconsciously or consciously, people that awaken and trigger what is in our seventh house, whether that's just a zodiac sign and there's no planets in it, or if it has planets. But what we do is we unconsciously attract other people that have the traits of that zodiac sign and or those planets to awaken those traits within ourselves. So let me explain. I have Chiron right on my descendant, exactly opposite Uranus on my ascendant. And I have a history of attracting a lot of wounded and they would call themselves broken. I don't necessarily believe in that, but people towards me. I've worked in recovery ministry when I was in the Christian world. I worked in recovery actually before I got into the Christian world. But long story short, I have worked in the world of spiritual healing for about 20 years, give or take. And what I didn't recognize until a really, really painful break that I made in 2024 is that I was unconsciously attracting the people that was triggering me, like wounding me. But through those wounds, it was unconsciously activating my ability to heal myself. I needed to see the aspects and be triggered by the aspects of the people in my life that had wounded me to awaken to my own power as a chironic healer. And the thing is that once we start to understand what we are trying to develop through the house of our, the lens of our seventh house, the more that we can begin to cultivate those traits within ourselves without having to have a karmic partner or a karmic lesson to keep trying to help us break that cycle or that pattern of wounding. And so for me, it was me having to understand that I was attracting people that were triggering my own wounds. And instead of continuing to choose that, I needed to heal myself. I needed to heal my relationship wounds. And so in 2024, I took a 7-month single and celibacy break to really, really focus on healing myself. And it was great because 7 months later, under the Libra eclipse, I met my now partner who we're both Libras. We met under the Libra eclipse, and I really, really believe that they're my soulmate. So long story short is that I didn't fully understand the role of Chiron in my seventh house was meant to wake me up to my own power. And the thing is that everybody has a Chiron. Everybody has this energy in their chart, in their psyche, that is very much waiting to be awakened into personal power. But when we are unconscious of this, it just feels like wounding over and over and over. And so I want to go ahead and move into some of the story, the myth of Chiron. So the first things first is that this story really originates in Greece. And Chiron is a centaur. He was born, unlike his wild, chaotic centaur fellow people. He was really different. He was very wise. He was gentle. He was profoundly gifted in the healing arts. But he was born from Cronus, and also a nymph named Pyleria. And so his first wound was marked by rejection because his mom was horrified by the fact that he was half horse and half human and abandoned him at birth. So he develops this really early wound of rejection and otherness. And that continues to move on because he is so different from his more violent counterparts that, were really involved in war. And he was involved in awareness and healing and the esoteric arts and astrology, especially. But essentially, what happens is that he is, because he's so wise, he is fostered by quite a few gods, particularly Apollo and Artemis. And he learns, the alchemical arts of astrology, healing medicine, music, ethics, prophecy. He was very, very wise, very ninth house oriented. And he became a master teacher. And to many of the important different Greek heroes of mythology like Achilles, Jason, Hercules. And he was the guide that really helped them discover their own greatness. And so besides, despite the fact that he was so wise, he got wounded again. And this is one of the things about Chiron, is that the wound never actually goes away. It just it reveals itself in different ways, and it very much goes along with trauma-based work. And that is, healing is not trying to make it go away. Healing is about learning how to deal with the repetition of a core wound, and the way in which we respond to it each time is how we heal, right? When we're not so triggered and we're able to look at things that hurt and be able to talk to somebody about it and reach repair and resolution, that's healing too. It's not necessarily the entire wound going away. So essentially, during an encounter with Hercules, he is accidentally shot with a poisonous arrow. And because of that, he starts his journey with wisdom and suffering on a whole other level. Because he is half man, half God, he's demigod, so he can't die. So what happens is that he spends years studying all different kinds of medicine, all the way from like a witch doctor to traditional medicine. He studies everything to try to make this wound stop hurting. And it doesn't go away. But what happens is that he realizes that he has a lot of knowledge and wisdom. And so he starts to help people that have wounds similar to his own, and finds purpose by helping others. So Chiron is the modern day ruler of Virgo, which Virgo's mantra is, I serve, to be of service. And this is a very specific call. Everybody has a Chiron. Where it's located and the generation in which you were born in dictates a lot. But essentially, over time, he's seen as such a humanitarian that he basically decides to sacrifice his godliness to Prometheus, who is also Uranus. And this sacrifice allows him to have peace, and the gods basically send him to the stars, and he is the constellation as Sagittarius. And so he is very much this bridge in a lot of different ways. So Chiron is not a planet. Chiron is actually a comet, and he is known as the rainbow bridge between the inner planets starting at Saturn and the evolutionary planets starting at Uranus. So he bridges that space between the Saturn return, the Uranus opposition, And then very, very much so is about liminal spaces because he is half man, half horse, half healer, half sufferer. He is half earth and half stars. So one of the things about him is that he is very much a both and. He's not one or the other. He lives in the space of liminality because he's a bridge. And he's also associated with shamanism, the chiropractic arts, but he's very much an in-between. And bridges are between like the tangible and the basically transpersonal, the transcendent, and so he really is there to help you move from restriction to and limitation into freedom through your wound. So, the famous Rumi quote, which is "the wound is where the light enters," is basically one of the best ways that I would describe one of Chiron's truest aspects, is that he sees that your wound is where the work happens. This is where the work is, and this is how you can reclaim your personal power and also be in service to others and the collective. And he does this a lot by being vulnerable. He does this a lot by being a vulnerable person in leadership and teaching. So he was a big believer that everybody, can be a person of service and in the healing arts. And he also shows us very much this bridge between what is suffering and purpose. So his signature in people's charts often denote different kinds of healers, depending on the zodiac signs that they're in and the locations of the chart that they're in. But he is very much associated, like I said, the chiropractic arts, functional medicine, naturopathy, astrology, the esoteric arts, shamanism, yoga, meditation, anything that is like ninth house beyond the conscious awareness is Chiron. And wherever he is in your chart tells you a lot about both your core wound as an individual as well as the core wound of your generation. So Chiron moves through each zodiac sign at about 8 years pace. Currently, at the time of this transmission, Chiron is in Aries, between 23 to 24 degrees of Aries, coming up very close on the goddess Eris. And she is very much a goddess of rebellion and says, take it to the streets. So I'm very interested to see what that aspect is going to bring later this summer. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about its location and some of its the ways that it comes through the zodiac signs and the houses. So if your Chiron is in the first house or Aries, the wound is identity. It really is like this question of, do I belong? The last time that Chiron was in Aries was also during the civil era where Martin Luther King Jr. was a huge voice. And he was saying, we belong here. we're just the same. And so he's very much like an Aries and Chironic kind of icon, you would say. But it is this feeling like you have to prove your right to exist, your identity to exist. And I feel like we're seeing that a lot right now, especially in America, around LGBTQIA plus issues, around anything immigration, around anything that has to do with being a person of color, basically not being a rich white person, cisgender person, having to, fight for your right to exist. And healing comes through fierce self-acceptance, to love yourself and to help bring people back to their own self-love and sovereignty. When Chiron is in the second house or Taurus, which it's in Taurus right now, or sorry, not Chiron's not in Taurus, I'm thinking of Uranus. Chiron is in Aries, like I said, but Chiron in Taurus or the second house is a wound of worth. It also comes with a lot of early experience of neglect, whether that is from not enough finances as a child growing up or not enough care or nurturance from a caregiver. But they really struggle around the feeling of survival, value, and feeling safe in the material world. They tend to have really built-in security wounds, have to really work on, like, I don't want to call it a lack mindset because there's real reasons why this wound is there. But your healing is found through trusting in the earth's abundance and teaching other people how to build lasting security rooted in self-worth and knowing your worth financially as well. Chiron and Gemini are the third house, is the wound of communication. So feeling unheard or misunderstood, like your voice isn't valid, like no one's ever going to understand you. Healing comes through reclaiming your voice and guiding others to speak and write their truth with courage. I was born in that generation. We were also the generation, the gerbil, ADHD. We got put on all kinds of meds because we couldn't sit still and we were misunderstood. It's also the wound of extreme attunement. You can feel everything. And it really leads to this hyper awareness and this hyper vigilance that comes from being misunderstood. But it's a very close ability to hear and feel things. Chiron and Cancer in the fourth house is the wound of belonging and the mother wound. It is this deep ache around the idea of home, family, nurturing, and emotional safety. So healing is found by creating sacred spaces of comfort and teaching others how to come home to themselves. It's also about remothering yourself, making sure you're eating good food, that you're in a safe space, that you have things like little blankies and stuff, and giving yourself permission to do that. Chiron and Leo are the fifth house, is the wound of creativity and recognition. So fears around being seen, celebrating, or expressing childlike joy. Very much you heal through daring to shine anyway, and inspiring others to, embrace their own brightness, their own loudness, and to take up space. One of the mantras I tell is, if you think I'm too much, go find less. The next is Chiron in Virgo, the sixth house, which is the wound of imperfection, feeling that you have to fix yourself or be endlessly useful to deserve love. Healing flows from realizing your innate wholeness and deservingness because you are here, and teaching others the sacredness of embodied service. Chiron and Libra are the seventh house, is the wound of relationships. This is a hard one. This is a real true fear of betrayal and abandonment, or a loss of self and partnership through codependency. Because you're afraid to be abandoned, you will sacrifice yourself to not be abandoned. And so healing comes through creating and cultivating true relationships that have reciprocity and balance to them, and helping to guide people to meet themselves deeply in love with themselves first, to know their own value and worth. Chiron and Scorpio, or the eighth house, is the wound of power and loss and transformation. This is a really hard one. This is trauma around trust, death, sexuality, betrayal. Healing is found by embracing the mystery of transformation and helping others navigate and rebirth within their own souls. So midwives, doulas, both spiritual and physical, really powerful stuff here. Chiron in Sagittarius, or the ninth house, is the wound of belief and meaning. So these are crisis of faith, feeling exiled from the truth or from any sort of spiritual community or mindset. It's also about fearing expansion and what's on the other side. These people really don't believe in things like luck. And so healing comes through reclaiming a vast soul-guided perspective and teaching others how to walk their unique wisdom path. Chiron and Capricorn, 10th house, the wound of achievement and recognition, feeling unseen, overburdened, or that sacrifice requires sacrificing your spirit. Healing comes by building soul-aligned legacies and agencies and showing others how to lead without losing themselves in the process. Chiron in Aquarius, or the 11th house, is the wound of feeling like you don't belong to humanity, like to groups of people. So feeling alien, outcast, or too different to be accepted. Healing is found by celebrating your visionary uniqueness and helping others awaken to their own unique and revolutionary gifts. And last but not least is Chiron in Pisces, which is the wound of spiritual abandonment. Feeling lost, disconnected, or burdened by collective grief. Healing flows from surrendering to divine love and guiding back to trust in unseen currents of life and rebuilding a spiritual practice that is deeply supportive and feels bigger than oneself. So those are the base level pieces of Chiron that I just wanted to, I'm building the foundation of this podcast right now and its teachings. And I just wanted to make sure that each person was able to hear me and to see where we're going. But essentially, in this podcast, my deep hope and mission is to empower fellow spiritual creatives, leaders, entrepreneurs, visionaries, to feel empowered and inspired to build their own spiritual based entrepreneurial practice, whether it's digital, whether it's in person, regardless. But I'm super excited to roll out a unique and creative signature program called the Chiron Creative. And it is a blend of spiritual entrepreneur based business building, strategy, messaging, ICA, etc., but also learning all of the different tips and tricks and things that Chiron healers need to know so that they don't unconsciously put themselves in positions where they need to heal because they were trying to help people heal their own woundedness and then got sucked into it somehow. And so things like psychic awareness and development, attunement to your own spiritual gifts, learning shielding, learning astrology, learning consciousness, learning how to work with different divination tools for shadow work and healing. But all of those things are coming, and I'll be sharing them on Monday, which is May the 5th, and I'm super excited to bring it out into the world. So if you felt like this was revealing for you, or if you found yourself in any of these stories, I encourage you to share this with your friends and keep coming back. My hope is to have a pod out every week and to continue to build the foundation of these teachings and then expand it out into questions, answers, interviews, etc. So I hope that this was helpful, and I will see you guys in our next session. Thanks, everyone. Bye.